Hi and welcome to a new episode of How It Works with Holger. Today we're going to do more web design with TMS WEB Core because as Delphi developers, the one thing we struggle with most is web design. And as a result, this will be yet another episode that proves TMS WEB Core is amazing. If you wonder why I make this claim that Delphi developers struggle with web design, TMS WEB Core has been introduced in 2017, and the number one question that people have, how to do the web design, that's what people struggle with most, to use the concepts that they have learned with the VCL and then transfer them to HTML, CSS. That all still seems a little bit strange to us as Delphi developers, and thus, in the next couple of How It Works with Holger, you will see a focus on front-end development on the web for sure. In this video, we're going to build the front end for a blog page. It consists of a header with a custom font and a subtitle, and then in the middle you see the dynamic content consisting of blog posts from several sources and grouped by the day. So you can see all the Delphi related blog posts from February 22nd, 21st, and go to the without having to go to the different blogs like Delphi books, TMS software, and all other sources that I collected. We also assume that the data comes from a backend which will not be investigated in this video. We just assume there is a backend that does deliver the information that we need to present in this video. This video purely focuses on the front end. The backend is not going to be our concern. Just assume we live in this wonderful world where there is a backend that delivers wonderful Delphi feeds to us. We just send a GET request to HTTPS. And then I'm going to use Delphi Feeds API, flixengineering.com API, version 1 posts. And this groups all the posts on several other Delphi blogs by day. And this is not really good here. So here the posts are given first, but if we scroll down, we see there is the day of publication. So on February 23rd, these posts have been made. And if we keep scrolling down here, for example, this is February 22nd, 21st, and in there we find all the different posts with title, link, and a description. And what is kind of cool, again, this is just the model here. One more feature that we're going to add is if we look at the different posts, for example here, one from TMS software, I can click, and then we go to that actual content in a different page or tab on our browser so that we can easily navigate to all the different news that is being published on that page. Of course, the design is not something that is in particular advanced for web developer, but for us, the number one key point is including fonts, using Bootstrap classes, having a clear structure, and then generating this dynamically. As you've seen now from the API, we have the day first, and each day has posts. And that is the content that we need to generate. And that's how we are going to use TMS WEB Core. We're going to build the head, and this part will be empty. And then we might add a footer. If you want to add a footer, you can do that. I haven't done this here, so you could add a copyright notice and stuff like that. And the content will be generated in between. Later on, we might think about doing paging because right now the last 14 posts or 14 days are being returned. So this ends on February 2nd here. So the API could definitely be extended to be variable. But as I said, I'm not going to put focus on the API. The focus here is on building the web design. So let's get started. I will keep this open as a reference on a secondary screen here. So I'll be cheating a little bit. I'll also be using Visual Studio Code for the initial web design. We're not going to use Delphi as a web design tool. That's not what Delphi is meant for. Delphi is meant for application development. So Visual Studio Code is the tool to use in this case. I've said so many times, the number one plugin we need is the live server. The live server allows us to launch a server for a static page that we're designing inside of Visual Studio Code. And I also used the GitHub Copilot, not as much in this module here, because web design is something I need to determine, and GitHub from my initial testing has not been particularly helpful if it comes to extending classes that I want to use. It can generate full pages more or less. It has not been as helpful when I'm writing my Bootstrap code to suggest matching or fitting classes. You'll see I'll leave Copilot enabled so you can assess how it helps you to work with your web design. First step is to create a folder on your disk. I named it How It Works Feeds Live. And in there, of course, we need an HTML page, index HTML. I press exclamation mark and enter, and I have the rough shape of the document that we need. Delphi posts is the title of the page that I'm going to use. And then I can already start the server. So I go to Go Live, my browser starts up, and right here I have my empty page. So let me move that to the right. And let's move the Visual Studio Code a little bit more to the left. We're not going to change anything here for the time being, so I can click here again and make it a little bit smaller. This can be smaller too. So the title of the page is going to be Delphi blog post, right? That's going to be the title of the page. And that has a completely different font. But before we deal with the fonts, I actually write the content. And the content has to be written inside of a container of Bootstrap. So in order to use Bootstrap in TMS WEB Core, we can do it quickly by adding the library. But here, so we have what you see is what you get. We need to add it. So we open on the browser tab, get Bootstrap, go to the bottom of the page right here, copy to clipboard. This is the first thing we need to add, copy to clipboard. And this is the second part we needed to add. And with that, we can make it a little bit smaller again. Flip over here. And we start by defining a div with a container. So container, and we give it a padding of 5, like that. We save. And with that, we can define the first row, and inside of the row, we want our title with the subtitle, right? And that we can do in a call of 12. But we only want this call 12 until the medium size of the device. I'll show you the difference. Let's define call 12 and a margin of 5 at the bottom. The number 1 to 5, the bigger the number, the bigger the margin. So 5 is actually the maximum in Bootstrap. And then here we can define a span with the display on class. And that gives us Delphi blog posts, the big title. Let's look at right here. You see, as soon as I save, this is being updated. And then below that, I want to have a paragraph with a class of lead. Also, again, a special Bootstrap class. And then I can say all your favorite Delphi blogs in one place. I save. There we go. There we have our layout. Of course, this looks much, much different from this, right? The fonts are very much different. The layout is the same. So how does this behave right now? So if I make this wider, you see that I get, the wider I make it, I get a wider margin here. So it stops growing at some point. But if I make it smaller, really, really small, I still keep these. So what I can do is that I say, as long as it is a medium device size, use the full column size. Otherwise, use the full screen size. So now with this, it uses the full screen size as soon as it's below below the medium size of the display size. So if you were looking at it on a phone, for example, the Delphi blog post would use the full width of the display device. So now to the fonts, and we're not going to customize our own Bootstrap framework using Sass or anything crazy like that. We're just going to use Google Fonts. And to do that is pretty easy. You go to Google Fonts, and then you have to browse the different fonts that are available. And I like one in particular that is Poppins. That's the one that I like for my text. So I click on Poppins, and I can click on Get Font. And I want to embed it in my code. I could also download it and then reference the file. That would mean I would have to upload the file on my server when I want to use that font. I just want to embed it so that somebody that accesses the web page from Europe gets a European server. Somebody who accesses the page from the United States uses a server that is closer to the United States. And with that, I have to choose the styles. And this is very, very important right now. The download is pretty big. All these are getting downloaded. You never want to download all the different font weights. You're probably going to use regular, the 400, and you're going to use bold, the 700. But there's a lot in between, especially if you don't use italic or a medium font or the thin. So what I do is I uncheck it here, and then I select the extra light 200, the regular 400, and the bold 700. Those are the ones that I need. And that makes the download faster. Accessing your page is faster if you select what you need. If you just say, oh, I need all of them, and you're not using it, you're wasting resources and bandwidth. And with that, we created the link for our web page. So we can go to copy code and go to our web page. Here we have to make sure that we stay in the head of our HTML and simply paste it in. That's number one. That's for the font for the body, and it's called Poppins. And now we have to associate our body, as you can see here, which is suggested by the Bootstrap, with our Poppins font. And actually, I'm not going to create a separate file. I am going to create a separate file. So we open here, click this, or escape, create a new folder, CSS. And in that folder, I'm going to call styles CSS, like so. And in there, I say that the body tag is going to use the font family. And the font family is going to be Poppins, right? And sans serif then for the defaults that are being used. And with that, we're not going to see any changes. If we look at our preview again, right here, flip over to the preview, no changes because we have referenced the font, we've added it to the style, but we haven't referenced the style to our HTML document yet. So here, we're going to say link, rel style sheet, yes, and the file is named CSS style CSS. And as soon as we save now, we see a change. The font now has changed to Poppins. This is the Poppins font. But our Delphi blog post still doesn't look like we want it to. And for that, we're going to use a second font, which is called, we go here, it's called Bungee. And it's a special Bungee font. It's the Bungee shade font that I use. So again, same procedure. The only difference is if we look at the font a little bit bigger, if we click on Get Font, there is only this one kind, regular 400. There aren't several different styles like thinner or bolder isn't available. There's only regular 400. So we copy the code with that and paste it into our document again. Again here, paste. And then we can update our style. And you might have figured this is only for the class display1. And none of this is true. Font size. And we call it bungee, shade, and otherwise that's not the case. We want to use cursive. Save, and that should already change things. We save, and it does not. Why doesn't it change the style? So I defined in the style for display one font, typo, font name, of course, not font size. Font name doesn't exist either. It's called font family. That's the key that we need. You already saw something updating here. Here we go. Now the font is the font that we need. And that's our main web design already. So nowadays, you seldom use images if you don't have to. Google Fonts is a great resource for all sorts of fonts that are free to use. Always look at the license, of course, but with Google Fonts, it's usually free. Another one is Font Squirrel. Font Squirrel also has free fonts that you can use on your web pages. So always important, if you use fonts, make sure that they are free and also available for commercial use, right? Because that has to be true for all the fonts that you offer on your web pages. But as you can see, there is like 451 sans serif fonts. And how many monospace fonts do they have? Like 14 typewriter, calligraphic 20. So there's so many fonts in addition to what we learned in one of my previous videos. We have icons that we can use that are also fonts in a way, but still we have now 100 new, over 2,000. The first video I did for TMS about web design with Bootstrap icons, we had like 1,000 icons. Like in my second edition of the book, which I wrote like last year, almost a year ago, it was 1,000. And now we have over 2,000. So these things are growing rapidly at no cost to us. So we made pretty good progress. We have the header of the page and we have the subtitle of the page. So now we need to create one template for the day, basically. How do we print the day? And then another template, how do we print one of the blog posts? And that is something that we can then, in our programming in TMS WEB Core, copy over and over again. If it's a new day, we generate that template. If it is a new post, we generate that template. That's all the application has to do. So for the new day, and I'm going to mark this here in the code, new day, we're going to do a new class, and we have a row, and we want a margin of 3 on the top and on the bottom. And we need a column. And again, we're going to say only up till medium device. And that gets an H2 with a class of FS3. That means font size 3, which is from 1 being the biggest font and 6 being the smallest regular font size. And then we want this in bold as well. And the date, I don't know, Saturday. And then 24th February, for example, 2024. That's our ideal thing we want to do. When we save that, then we already have our header for the blog post. So the final thing remaining is the actual blog post, right? So Copilot already suggests that. So we need a row. And on that row, we do a col MD10. And then a border of 3 if we wanted to. Let's keep it on the same. A bottom 4, like so. And I only use 10 columns. That means because a row has 12, there's 2 columns on the right that stay unused, and that's intentional. So we can either use those for icons, for example, Embarcadero MVP partner icon, other logos, or archive information, stuff like that goes on the right. The main intent is we don't want to overload the page with information. Even 10 might be a little bit much, and we might reduce it to 8 to not have too much information on the row horizontally to have it more vertically, which makes reading it easier. And then we need the title of the post. So another H2 tag, FS5, and bold again. And then we're gonna have a lorem with, I don't know, 5 words maybe. Perfect. And then we have a span with text secondary. This will be the source. Where does this blog post originate from? ME3. And again, for example, this comes from Holger's code, for example. And ME3 means that after Holger's code, we have a margin to the following span, because we have another span with the actual content or description of the blog post, right? So black text, FS6 for regular size, and then lighter text weight, meaning it's not bold, the opposite of bold. We want to make it lighter. And then we put like, I don't know, 30 words in there. Perfect. Save. And with that, our blog page is complete. So you see we have the date, we have the title of the blog post, we have the origin, and then here we have the actual text. And if we pull this out, you see that it is fully responsive. And what I meant with the vertical, you see how far out this goes. So it might actually be better not to use the full 10, to only use like 8 to make it easier to read. See, much easier to read this way. And then you have, of course, a lot of unused space here. I admit that, but let's be honest, it makes it easier to read for us if it's from top to bottom. And this can be used, I don't know, you can use it for other stuff like an archive or a little tiny calendar when the other posts are to jump quickly. So that is, let's leave this open for now. At this point, believe it or not, our web design is complete. And because of that, I'll repeat it once more and sum it up, what we did so far. We have created a new HTML document, and then we added the Bootstrap reference, so we can use Bootstrap. We'll find that right here. And we'll also added the script for Bootstrap. And in order to use the Google fonts, we added the 2 references for the fonts we picked at googlefonts.com. That was the basics in order to use the fonts and in order to do Bootstrap. However, we now have to tell Bootstrap use these fonts for certain classes. So we added a style sheet, and that style sheet overrides the font family for the body tag. If you're not so deep with CSS, if I just specify the tag, so this literally refers to every tag in HTML or everything that's in between the body tag. And with regards here, see there is a period in the beginning that refers to the class display1, and we changed the font family to Bungie Shade. So looking at here at the document, we see that we have the class display1 right here. So this will get the font family Bungie Shade, and the body tag, which I don't know what it is with me and the body tag. If you watch my last video, I always move the body tag for whatever reason, and this has to be all in between the body tag, like this. Perfect. I don't know what it is with me and the body tag. I apologize. For whatever reason, I always start typing between other tags, but so the body tags open up the document, and everything in between is our web design. And there we have 2 essential parts. The first part is the header part, and the second part is the one with the blog entries, with the blog posts, and they're grouped by date, so the date is bolder or bigger than the actual blog post. And we divided it as follows. Everything is embedded in a container. The first row is the title of the page with a lead-in right here. And then the header of each day, we have a separate row, which is the complete row we use just for the date, and we use the font size number 3, make it bold. And then for the blog post, again, separate row consisting of 8 columns, as long as it's wide enough. As soon as you go beyond or smaller than the medium-sized display, you will then get the full size. You can see that right here. If we move it smaller, 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 and then we have the full size. There is no space on the right like here. See, there is space, and as soon as I get smaller, that goes away and it uses the whole size of the display. If you later on, when we have the application completed, if you try that on your phone, you see how well that scales. So finally, we have a header H2 with a font size of 5. So you might wonder, font size 5? But why does Holger use H2? Because H2 is usually bigger, right? It's bigger than this. So if I take the class out, I know I'm in summary mode. See, then it's bigger than this. But because I have the font size in there, and you really have to read the Bootstrap documentation word by word, the H2 tag determines the line height and the distances. So I use H2 to get a nice distance from the text, but I want the font size using FS5. That's, if you look at designs that are done with Bootstrap, that's how the web designers do it. And with that, we try to get the name of the blog in. Text secondary is the secondary color, which is a little bit lighter than black. And ME3, that's this distance right here. And then the text of the blog post is in black, font size 6. And we use a light font weight, not light color, light weight, FW font weight. So you see the characters are lighter than all of the other ones. And these obviously are all bold, so they are characters with the most weight. In Bootstrap terms, bold is 700, regular, like this, is 400, and thin or lighter is 200. There's also a variant that is smaller, but this one looks pretty nice if you look at the final design. How do I know all this? Well, let me show you that as well. If you go to the documentation, you can type in weight, not white, weight, and you have the font weight and italics. And here's all the different kinds of weights that you have available. But if you scroll down, that's the key right here. You see that bold is 700, semi-bold is 600, medium is 500, normal is 400, light is 300, and lighter is another variable, I would assume. I don't want to dig deep, but it's 200. And if you want to know for sure how everything is affected, you can always go into the developer console, look at the element, and go to the computed property. And there you get all the different properties for the element that you select. And you see font family, pop-ins, font size 16, which is the default size for a Bootstrap document. So there's that. And the font weight is 300, not 200, obviously, I guess. Let's see here. This is font weight 300 because I selected FW light. Let's see if that matches. Yes, 300. And which font did I load? Let's see right here. 200. Guess what? Let's load 300 and correct the mistake that I made. See, nobody's perfect. And there you go. It's now a little bit wider, or yeah, not wider, a little bit more weight to the font. So that's not what I want. I actually want the 200. I liked it much better. So that's an interesting fact. If the font isn't found, it takes the one that's below that. So I would assume if I were to specify lighter, like this, I would then get the 200. Perfect. That's exactly what's happening. Oh no, that is 100 now. So that's really interesting. If I pick light, I get the 300. But because I loaded the 200, it gives me the 200 font. That is something with web design right here, because I loaded the 200. Let's load the correct one, load the 300. And with that, we have still a nice thin font. You see that just because you select something in Google Fonts, if you say, hey, I want the 200 and 400, it still has to match. And in order to match it up, you have to look in the framework that you use, which font weights it uses. And these are, of course, and I'll do a video, I promise you that. Well, we will do more advanced Bootstrap videos as long as you give me a thumbs up and comment that you like these videos. We will do deeper videos with Bootstrap because these variables are customizable. You can literally create your own specific version of Bootstrap with your company brand colors. That is all possible nowadays using a technology which is called Sass. And we'll do that a little bit later on. I don't want to start with that. I just want to build a couple of examples first, like this one. So the next step is now to import this into TMS WEB Core and actually add the dynamic part. And guess what? I'm going to split this video right here. I'm going to keep the tension going a little bit. TMS will hate me for it, but this will be another video. Cut here. See you in the next video. We'll build the TMS WEB Core application for the design that we just created. Take care.